Alden Rookwood, Myra Rookwood, and Tolan Rookwood gathered around a dinner table that had not seen them together in months, unaware that the tension between them hid a secret powerful enough to tear their family apart, an unseen force waiting in the shadows, ready to turn a quiet evening into a brutal massacre. The Rookwood family lived in a grand but isolated estate at the edge of a dense forest. Far from the nearest neighbors, the house stood tall and silent, with gray stone walls that seemed to hold memories no one talked about. For years, the family appeared united from a distance. But anyone who paid closer attention sensed a kind of tension that did not match their elegant lifestyle. The three siblings, Myra and Talon, were rarely seen outside the estate, except for school or short errands. Their parents, Ira and Corvin, kept their personal lives locked away, allowing only fragments of information to slip into the world. The family had not shared a dinner table in months. Work trips, cold moods, and quiet conflicts had stretched the distance between them. So when Ira announced a family dinner, it felt like something unusual was taking place. She spent hours preparing the dining room, choosing silverware that had not been touched in years, and arranging candles in a careful pattern across the long wooden table. She walked through the room, again and again, adjusting small details as if she were trying to force the evening into perfection. Alden arrived first. He was the oldest sibling, tall and steady, but with eyes that always looked like they were searching for something unseen. He took a slow breath as he stepped inside, noticing the heavy scent of spices in the air. Myra entered shortly after, moving quietly, her expression unreadable. She carried an energy that made people uneasy, as if she observed everything but shared nothing. Tolan appeared last. He was the youngest, often lost in his own world, with a distant look that made even his own family unsure of what went on inside his mind. He stepped into the dining room without looking at anyone directly. Corvin joined them with the calmness of a man used to controlling every situation. But he seemed unusually tense. Ira took her seat at the end of the table, nervous in a way none of her children had seen before. The moment everyone sat down, silence rose higher than the walls around them. The only sounds were the clinking of cutlery and the soft burning of candle flames. The air felt tight, as if the room itself held its breath. No one exchanged glances for too long. No one seemed comfortable. The shadows cast by the candles shifted slowly across their faces, making them appear even more distant from one another. Outside, the wind brushed against the windows with a scratching sound, adding to the uneasy atmosphere. Minutes passed, and the strange quiet deepened. Alden kept his focus on the doorways, as if expecting something to appear. Myra's eyes followed the flickering candlelight, her thoughts drifting somewhere far from the table. Tolan ate, slowly, barely touching his food, moving like someone unsure of his survival. Ira kept adjusting her napkin, trying to appear composed. Corvin watched each of his children as though he were assessing them individually. Then, a faint metallic clatter came from the far end of the house. It was not loud, but it cut through the silence sharply enough to make everyone pause. The sound faded quickly, and the family returned to their plates, though their movements had grown tighter. What none of them noticed was the kitchen door, slightly open when it should have been closed. Moments later, the lights flickered, not enough to cause alarm, but enough to push the tension deeper into everyone's minds. The candles struggled, their flames shrinking, then rising again. A cold draft slipped across the floor and brushed past their feet. At 8:55 p.m., a crash erupted from the back hallway. It was heavy and sudden, like something large had fallen. The family froze. Corvin pushed his chair back, but before he could stand, the house fell into complete darkness. The candles blew out one by one, leaving the room swallowed by shadows in the blackness. The sound of hurried steps echoed in a distant part of the house. Then came a single scream from somewhere near the study. Another thud followed, sharper than the first. The siblings stumbled away from the table, feeling their way through the darkness, their hearts pounding. The sounds inside the house, multiplied creaking boards, shifting weight, soft scraping that did not belong to anyone in the family. When the lights finally returned, Ira was missing. A shattered vase lay on the floor near the hallway entrance, and a thin trail of dark stains stretched toward the stairs. The siblings stared at each other, each holding fear shaped by secrets none of them had ever spoken aloud. Unseen, outside the house, someone watched through the trees, unmoving and patient, as if everything was unfolding exactly as intended. Detective Lysa Marin arrived at the Rookwood estate before sunrise, stepping out of her car into a cold morning mist that clung to everything it touched. The property looked peaceful at first glance, but the silence felt unnatural, as if the estate had been holding its breath since the night before. The front gate stood half open, something the family never allowed. Lysa walked up the long driveway, scanning the trees that bordered the path, noticing how the branches leaned inward like they were shielding the house from the world inside. The scene was worse than expected. Corvin stood near the dining room, shaken and pale, while Alden, Mira, and Tallin sat apart from each other, each looking lost in a different way. Ira was still missing, and the strange marks leading toward the staircase created more questions than answers. Lysa moved slowly through the dining room, taking in every detail. The chairs were pushed back at odd angles. Candle wax had dripped across the table in uneven streams. A heavy sense of disorder hung in the air, yet nothing valuable had been touched. The shattered vase by the hallway appeared to be the first sign of a struggle. Lysa knelt to examine the shards and noticed a fine trail of dust underneath them. The dust suggested the vase had been moved days earlier, before finally falling. Something about that small detail unsettled her, as if it hinted at a larger pattern she could not yet see. Draven Kells, the forensic analyst, arrived shortly after. He inspected the stains that stretched toward the staircase and confirmed they were inconsistent with normal household injuries. The trail stopped halfway up the stairs, almost as if someone had deliberately wiped it away. Lysa followed it slowly, studying the walls, noting faint smudges shaped by hurried movement. The upper hallway smelled different from the rest of the house, carrying a stale scent that suggested a door had recently been opened after being shut for a long time. Inside the master bedroom, nothing seemed out of place at first glance. The bed was neatly made, clothes were folded on a chair, and even the curtains were perfectly aligned. But the room felt too controlled, too prepared, like someone had been ready for inspection. Lysa examined the bedside table and found a drawer that stuck slightly when she pulled it. Inside were old family photos, many of them featuring Ira and Corvin with the children at different ages. What caught her attention was that several pictures had been removed, leaving empty spaces where images once rested. Downstairs, Draven continued checking the layout of the house. He discovered a hidden storage room behind the pantry, secured with a lock that had been broken recently. Inside were boxes filled with old documents, letters, and objects that looked like they had belonged to previous generations of the Rookwood family. Dust covered almost everything, except for a single metal box placed on top of a stack of books. The box had fingerprints smudged across it, too fresh to fit the scene's otherwise untouched appearance. Lysa examined the box carefully. It contained financial records, handwritten notes, and several letters that hinted at long-standing conflicts within the family. The documents suggested disputes over inheritance, land rights, and hidden assets, though nothing directly pointed to violence. The tension woven through the pages revealed a family with deep internal fractures. Outside, neighbor Ren Halcor watched from his porch, drawn by the flashing lights and police activity. His property bordered the forest behind the Rookwood estate, and he approached Lysa with a hesitant step. He explained that he had heard a series of strange sounds the previous night. A heavy thud, a short scream, and what he believed were footsteps running across the forest floor. He admitted he had assumed it was an animal, but the timing now made him question what he had heard. Lysa walked with him to the forest's edge, studying the soft ground for signs of movement. She found footprints mixed with disturbed leaves, leading deeper between the trees. The tracks were partially covered by fallen branches, suggesting they had been left hours earlier. She followed them carefully until the path split in two directions. One set of footprints belonged to someone wearing heavy boots. The other set was smaller, lighter, and had a strange, uneven pattern. As she stood there, the early morning sun rose, revealing the estate from a new angle. The beautiful home, once a symbol of wealth and stability, now looked fragile and hollow. Lysa realized this case would not be simple. Nothing about the Rookwoods was ordinary, and every detail pointed toward secrets buried far deeper than a missing family member. The investigation had only just begun, but the foundation of the family's carefully built image had already cracked. And somewhere within those cracks, something dangerous had been hiding, waiting for the moment to strike. Detective Lysa Marin returned to the estate later that afternoon after the forensics team completed their initial sweep. The tension inside the house had thickened, settling into every corner like a heavy fog. Alden, Mira, and Tolan were placed in separate rooms to keep them from influencing one another's accounts. Lysa knew that family members often revealed more through silence than words, so she watched their behavior carefully. Alden sat rigidly in a study chair, staring at the window as if trying to see something hidden beyond the trees. His hands were steady, but his jaw remained tense, suggesting he was holding back more than he admitted. Mira, isolated in the library, examined the shelves without touching anything, her mind moving faster than her still posture showed. Tolan remained in a small room near the staircase, curled slightly forward, avoiding everyone's gaze. Each sibling seemed trapped inside a private storm. Meanwhile, Draven Kells reviewed the evidence collected from the hidden storage room. There were discrepancies that troubled him. Some documents had been disturbed recently, while others appeared untouched for years. The fingerprints on the metal box matched one of the siblings, though the report did not yet reveal which. This detail raised questions about who had been searching through old family records, and why. Lysa focused on Ira's disappearance, retracing the trail of faint stains left behind. The pathway ended near a locked door in the upstairs hallway. The lock had scratch marks around it, as if someone had attempted to force it open. After obtaining permission, Lysa had the door broken down. Beyond, it was a narrow staircase, leading to a small attic space that smelled of dust and cold air. The attic contained boxes filled with old toys, photographs, and holiday decorations. Yet something felt off. A large trunk in the corner had a thin line of dust missing across the top, showing it had been opened recently. Inside were more photos of the family, but these were different. Many captured the siblings separately, standing alone in isolated parts of the estate. The images were taken over several years, suggesting someone had been watching the children and documenting their lives without their knowledge. As Lysa studied the photos, she noticed that Ira appeared tense or fearful in most of them. Corvin looked distant, with an expression that stayed the same in nearly every picture. The siblings, especially Tolan, looked increasingly withdrawn as the years progressed. Whoever took the photos had focused heavily on Tolan, capturing him from angles that suggested surveillance rather than affection. When Lysa returned downstairs, she found Draven in the kitchen, reviewing another disturbing discovery. A set of muddy footprints had been found near the back entrance, different from the ones the police had made. The pattern matched the uneven footprint set from the forest. The direction of the prints indicated someone had entered the house the previous night. Moving quickly and deliberately toward the dining room, outside, police officers expanded their search around the property. Near the edge of the forest, they discovered torn pieces of fabric snagged on branches. The fabric matched a shirt that Ira was known to wear. Nearby, the ground showed signs of a struggle, with deep marks in the soil and crushed vegetation. However, no clear signs of where she had been taken next appeared. Lysa reviewed the siblings' statements again. Alden claimed he heard the crash, but did not see what caused it. Mira insisted she had been focused on the candles when the lights went out. Tolan said he remembered nothing after the darkness. Their accounts contained no lies she could prove, but each story felt incomplete. It was clear they were hiding something, but not necessarily the same thing. Back inside the dining room, Lysa paused, staring at the long wooden table. She noticed a faint mark on the surface, an indentation shaped like the edge of a metal object. It did not match any of the household items nearby. Whatever caused it had been slammed onto the table with force. The mark was recent, and the shape hinted at something sharp. As the afternoon faded into evening, the estate felt heavier than ever, as if the walls were absorbing every secret that had been spoken and every truth left unsaid. Lysa sensed that the family had been unraveling long before the night of the dinner. Every clue pointed toward tensions buried deep within their history. Tensions that had now erupted into violence. And somewhere inside the house or beyond it, the missing pieces waited, hidden in shadows that seemed to grow darker with each passing hour. The truth was close, but still covered by layers of fear, silence, and something else. Something dangerous that none of the siblings had admitted to. Yet Detective Lysa Marin returned to the estate the next morning with a sharper focus. The case had moved beyond a missing person and now resembled a carefully orchestrated event. The property felt different in daylight. The thick trees surrounding the home looked less like protection and more like barriers, trapping whatever truth hid inside. The air carried a stillness that suggested the estate was holding parts of the story out of reach. Inside the house, the siblings remained separated. Lysa watched them closely as officers moved through the rooms, collecting more evidence. Their reactions told her more than their official statements ever could. Alden paced the study with restless energy, stopping at the bookshelves, as though looking for something that was no longer there. Mira sat in the library chair, unmoving, staring at the floor with an expression that suggested she was calculating possibilities. Tolan had withdrawn even further, sitting on the edge of a small bed, hands pressed tightly against his legs, eyes darting to every sound in the hallway. Draven Kells entered with the newest forensic updates. Blood analysis confirmed that the stains found near the staircase belonged to Ira, but the amount indicated she was likely still alive when she was moved. The pattern suggested she had been dragged, not carried, as if the person transporting her wanted to minimize noise. Another small trace was discovered near the back entrance, a thin smear of soil, mixed with a chemical compound used for treating old wood. The same compound was present in the attic trunk found earlier. This connection made Lysa consider the possibility that Ira had been taken into a part of the house that had not yet been fully inspected. She asked officers to search the basement again. The basement was a maze of rooms built decades earlier, some renovated and some untouched since the house was constructed. The air was colder there, as though the sunlight never managed to reach the stone walls. In one of the older rooms, officers found a wooden board that had been slid slightly to the side. Behind it, hidden in the wall, was a narrow opening leading into a dark crawlspace. The ground inside was disturbed, with tracks suggesting recent movement. The space was too small for an adult to comfortably travel through, yet the marks showed someone had forced their way inside. Near the opening, they discovered a torn scrap of fabric from Ira's clothing. Lysa realized that whoever moved Ira had intimate knowledge of the estate's structure. She returned upstairs and reviewed the siblings again, studying their body language as she walked past. Each one reacted in a different way the moment she mentioned the basement. Alden stiffened instantly. Mira's expression did not change, but her fingers pressed tightly together. Tolan looked down, shoulders rising as though bracing himself for something unseen. Outside, officers extended their search farther into the forest. They discovered a series of partially buried wooden planks arranged in a pattern, almost forming the outline of a structure that had once stood there. Some planks were newer, showing signs of being moved recently. Draven examined the soil around them and noticed traces of footprints leading deeper into the woods, though the trail faded quickly as the ground became harder. Curious about the forest's history, Lysa reviewed old property records. She learned that before the estate was built, the land had belonged to earlier generations of the Rookwood family. Some structures had been demolished, and others abandoned. One old map indicated a small cabin once stood about a kilometer north of the current house. Though it had been torn down, its foundation might still be present. Lysa set out with 2 officers toward the location. The forest grew thicker, and the ground sloped downward. After several minutes of searching, they located broken stones arranged in a rough square. Near the foundation, they found fresh indentations in the dirt, as though someone had knelt there recently. A single thread of dark coarse fabric rested on the stone. Lysa recognized the material as part of a jacket discovered in the storage room days earlier. Returning to the estate, she evaluated every piece of information gathered so far. The attic photos, the hidden crawlspace, the missing images from the drawers, the box of documents, and the tracks in the forest all pointed toward someone conducting secret activities within and around the property for years. This person had watched the family closely, observing their movements and documenting their private lives. The level of preparation suggested patience, knowledge, and motive. Everything led back to the Rookwood family's past, a past none of the siblings seemed willing to reveal. Lysa sensed the truth was close, but still tangled in layers of fear and long-standing grudges. The estate felt like a puzzle laid out in plain sight, waiting for her to place the final pieces together. And somewhere between the house and the forest, Ira's fate remained suspended, hidden within the shadows of secrets that had been growing for decades. Detective Lysa Marin spent the early morning walking through the estate with a slow but determined pace, feeling the weight of every clue settle around her. The house seemed quieter than before, as if it had exhausted its energy after revealing so many fragments of the truth. The siblings remained separated, but their tension lingered in the halls like a cold draft. Alden sat near a window, staring outside with a focus that felt more like avoidance. Mira remained still, her posture disciplined but her eyes carrying a restless spark. Tolan stayed withdrawn, his breathing shallow, as though he expected something to emerge from the silence. Draven, Kells joined Lysa with the final forensic report. The results confirmed that the chemical compound found near Ira's trail matched wood preservative used decades earlier in an old cabin that had once stood on the property. The fabric found near the abandoned foundation in the forest also matched a jacket discovered in the hidden storage room. The pieces now formed a pattern rather than isolated symbols. Someone had been revisiting that old location, using the remnants of the cabin to hide activities that no one had suspected. Lysa turned her attention to the siblings again, sensing that the answer lay not in the physical evidence, but in the relationships between them. Alden's calm exterior felt like a shield built over years of uncertainty. Mira's sharp intelligence suggested she understood far more than she admitted. Talon's retreat into silence hinted at fear rather than guilt. Each one held a fragment of a story, but none appeared prepared to share it fully. When Lysa entered the dining room, she noticed a faint outline on the table where the metal object had struck. The shape resembled part of a tool, commonly used for breaking old wood or prying open sealed surfaces. She found a matching tool in the basement, hidden behind old boxes, partially covered in dust. The dust was disturbed, indicating recent movement. The tool showed traces of soil, identical to the soil found in the forest and near the buried planks. This meant someone had used it to open something, most likely the crawlspace or the old cabin area. As she examined the tool, a sudden noise echoed from upstairs, a soft thump that contrasted sharply with the stillness. Lysa moved quickly toward the staircase and found Tolan standing near the attic door, trembling, his eyes fixed on the floor. The attic photos lay scattered on a table. Several had been removed from their original positions, confirming that someone had tampered with the collection. Talon's hands shook, and the faint smell of the chemical preservative lingered around him. Lysa approached slowly, observing the way Tolan avoided her gaze. She saw dirt on his shoes consistent with footprints found near the old foundation. She also saw a small tear in his jacket sleeve, matching the threads discovered earlier. For a moment, everything aligned. The photos, the cabin, the tool, the footprints, and the missing pieces of the family's history. But then Lysa noticed something else. The photos featuring Tolan alone were not taken by an outsider. They were taken by someone who knew the estate intimately, someone who moved through it with ease. The angles of the photographs suggested the photographer stood close, observing quietly but not hiding. This pointed back to Ward, a family member who had access everywhere. Mira's room held a camera with a smudged lens and a memory card missing. The card was later found tucked inside one of her books. When Lysa confronted her, Mira remained composed, but her eyes betrayed a long history of fear. She had been documenting the family, watching Tolan deteriorate over the years as the secrets surrounding their past grew heavier. She had seen signs of something buried in the estate, something connected to an old tragedy that had never been spoken aloud. Tolan, pressured by memories he could not understand, had been drawn to the remnants of the cabin, where he believed answers lay. Ira had followed him the night of the dinner, attempting to stop him from revisiting the past. The struggle had begun there, and the darkness had swallowed the rest. By the time Lysa reached the forest again, the trail had gone cold. Ira was still missing, but the truth behind the night was no longer hidden. The estate, the cabin, the photographs, and the siblings' fear formed a single narrative, a family shaped by shadows, haunted by a secret that had grown until it finally burst into violence. And though the case felt nearly solved, the silence of the forest suggested that some truths preferred to remain buried.